really trying to focus on some of the accomplishments that we're making. You know, we hear all the time that Democrats are in a minority status and it's difficult to pass legislation, but I want you all to understand and for people to understand that we work very hard to try to move our agenda along. And so this week we've had several what I feel is significant pieces of legislation to come through. President, he is president of NCSF, okay. Representative Love, he got so many titles. He passed a piece of legislation, out of departments and agencies that, deals with reducing the hardships on families who have loved ones that's been incarcerated. And oftentimes we hear from families who, probably in West Tennessee, family member is in East Tennessee. And it's difficult to stay in touch with that family, and this will go to their back. We had Representative Shaw pass an important piece of legislation that was a pilot program dealing with Alzheimer's and respite care, and being able to help families who are dealing with people like my mom, dealing with Alzheimer's. And so what this pilot project would do is it would be extended and we can get the funding for families on a recurring basis. So that was a major hurdle for us, something that we care a lot about. Hakeem passed some legislation out of state and local that raises the reimbursement around property tax relief for disabled veterans. That's been an issue for years where we had it at a certain rate, the comptroller and others was wanting to reduce it, wanting to get rid of it, and because the funding wasn't there, but you know, veterans have often are used to talk about how we care about our veterans, but then we won't pass legislation to support our veterans. So that's what that's gonna do. And I'm hoping that that piece of legislation, which was supported by the Veterans Caucus, can continue to go through finance and make it in the budget. My legislation dealt with personal hygiene for girls in high school, middle schools, where we're gonna do a pilot project that authorized at least one high school in each grand division to provide these products to girls for free. Offer an opportunity for nonprofits and churches to donate the products, and the schools will set up the vending machines where they can go and get. That's just a few of the pieces of legislation that we passed. There were others, but I really wanted to highlight that we are working our agenda. We are trying to move forward with things that families care about. We're sticking to our promise to the seniors that we're fighting for them, and that we're going to continue to fight regardless of the status that we find ourselves. So we're looking across the aisle to try to find like-minded people to vote with us to help us move our agenda forward. And I'll yield to Chairman Clemmons for we want to lead us.
I think Jeff and I both have plenty to say this morning. Yeah, thank you. So I want to point out that what you heard there were bills intended to help people, to benefit Tennessee families. What you did not hear in any of those pieces of legislation being promoted by Democrats was anybody being discriminated against, anybody being targeted unfairly, anybody going outside of the state's jurisdiction to deprive people of their right to love who they want, to marry who they want, do what they want with their lives, and exercise their constitutional freedoms. You didn't hear any of that in the Democrats' legislation. We're focused on benefiting families. That's it. That's our agenda. Focusing on Tennessee families first. All this other nonsense that we're dealing with up here is noise. And it's distraction and deflection from what really matters. And that's Tennessee families that elect us to represent them. And I'm coming in a little hot today. I just want to start off by saying thank you to the Nashville Banner, Sarah Grace Taylor, and the whole staff for the incredible work they did to prove that this federal administration lied to everybody yet again. And what they're doing in our community, in my district, Senator Yarbro's district, Senator Charlene Oliver's district, Representative Jason Powell's district, because we happen to represent diverse communities, proudly represent diverse communities and families that continue
to be unfairly and unconstitutionally and illegally targeted based on the color of their skin. Not only are they being instructed to do this by people at the highest levels of government in Washington, D.C., but they're being allowed to do this by the governor of the state of Tennessee, using your taxpayer dollars to assist with this conduct that is taking place across our communities, targeting our families. And I'm sick and tired of it. The families we represent add incredible value. And there is no reason that children that we represent should have to live in fear of getting picked up on their way to school just because of the color of their skin. Our country's been through this. Did we not learn anything? We have been through this. Are we not learning from the mistakes we made in the past? Why should children have to go to school worried about if their parents are going to be there when they get home? I mean, of all the problems we have in this state and country, this is what they're focused on. These are the harms that they're creating in our society. This should rattle every single American to their core. Not only that the federal government, the President of the United States, is lying to them, he's lying to the press with incorrect facts and data that fortunately has been uncovered, but they're lying about their goal. You know, they said they're targeting gangs. They said they're doing this and that. None of it's true. None of it's true. What they're doing is targeting humans. They're targeting valuable members of our community that add incredible value, and innocent children. We speak time and time again up here about, and I did today, about wanting to focus on the issues that matter, just doing our job. And it's incredibly difficult when you have this type of thing taking place in the communities you represent. It is hard. We live here every week, we live here every night, and go into our districts and have to try to explain what is happening and why our hands are tied and how much we care. And it is harder and harder every day to do that when you have an administration run by people of this ilk and a state government that is facilitating it. I mean, Governor Bill Lee should be absolutely ashamed that he's facilitating this type of conduct in our communities. So this is just as much on him as anybody. But I want you to think about, we all know who's driving this train in Washington. It's Stephen Miller. Now, I don't go around calling people names. I don't know what's in people's hearts. I only know what they do and what they say. That's how I judge people, through their actions. We know who and what Stephen Miller is. And the things that are taking place in my district, Senator Yarbro's district, and in Memphis, are a direct result of who Stephen Miller is. And things that were highlighted and uncovered in the Nashville Banner story should be paralleled with the fact that the entire Republican agenda this session is directly at the instruction of Stephen Miller. So if he's doing this in our communities with law enforcement, he's also doing it with legislation, because the people running this state government are taking instructions and acting at the instruction and behest of Stephen Miller. There is no line between the two. The aim is the same. So let's be very clear about the parallel between what's happening in our communities with law enforcement and what's happening in the state capitol with legislation targeting innocent families and communities and innocent children. Don't let them try to separate the two. because they are intrinsically tied together by the same person pulling the strings at the very top. And we know what and who Stephen Miller is.
I'll answer more questions, but I'll let Senator Yarbro take the one.
I've represented Nashville's Nolensville Pike corridor for the last decade. Probably has more first-generation Americans than any other street in the state of Tennessee. And the reporting that's been done, reviewing the body cam footage of the joint ICE Tennessee Highway Patrol operation that occurred in May 2025, should be sickening to every Tennessean, to every American. It has nothing to do with what you think about immigration. It has nothing to do with what you think about deportation. It has to do with whether you think, one, the government should tell the truth, two, whether law enforcement should act with some degree of professionalism, and three, whether human beings should be treated like human beings. They were, in their own words, hunting people and tagging by using Sharpies, writing on the skin of the people they caught, because they were keeping score to see who would get the most. That is vile. It's disturbing. And the fact that the Tennessee Highway Patrol participated in that is an embarrassment and a shame on the state, on the Highway Patrol, and on all of us. I want to reinforce the fact of just how much they didn't tell the truth about this. Because this was happening in my district. I remember watching newscasts and reading the reports that reported all the information that's coming out from the federal government and ICE about all of the criminals and gang members that they had targeted, and the importance that they were putting on safety. And the reality is that's just all garbage. It's not true at all. The stops were all almost entirely pretextual. The story that got me in this is there's one guy who got pulled over in a Tesla for driving 65 and a 40. This is a white guy, was coming home from a cigar bar. And that guy, he got to talk about cigars and got a warning, left with no citation. But the person with a bent license plate gets detained, gets tagged like cattle. What are we becoming? And maybe it's not that shocking now because we've all seen what happened in Minneapolis, but what happened in May 2025 in Tennessee was really in some ways a testing ground and turning point for where ICE was gonna go and where it's going and where it is now. Prior to this year, a significant portion of the people who were actually in immigration detention were in fact violent criminals. But that's not the case anymore. And this dragnet operation picked up over, almost the vast majority of people had zero criminal record at all. They were just the people who are making sure that our construction industry, the hospitality industry stay afloat. And it's genuinely appalling. And to see this legislature take instructions from the Stephen Miller, the same architect of this, the architect of conduct that should disgust every American, it's beyond the pale. And I appreciate Leader Camper talking about the issues that Democrats have been pushing in other legislative agendas this year in terms of the things that would actually really help people. But man, we have to focus on the fact that our government, and it was being done in the name of Tennessee citizens, under the U.S. flag, under the Tennessee flag, does not live up to our values. And this is an important come to Jesus moment where all of us who are used to receiving information and putting it on our newscast or in our paper or restating it because it's come from the federal government, turns out it's just not credible information. They're misleading us day in, day out. And I mean, that demands a higher level of work from us, from y'all, from citizens, because this is it's just a situation that no democracy should want to be in, but it is the one we are in right now, and it needs to be addressed, so.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, because here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna say that we're up here standing up, you know, defending illegal immigrants. That's gonna be what they're saying. Oh, they're up there. Listen to what Senator Yarbro said. Regardless of what you feel about immigration, what is happening in our community, it's unconstitutional, it's illegal. And we have said time and time again, the immigration system is broken. Absolutely broken. Yet they are choosing to target the people who are victims of that broken system rather than do the work to fix the system itself, where it belongs to get fixed, in Washington, D.C. The very people with all the power, pulling all the strings, have the ability to fix this system of broken immigration. Yet they're choosing to target these families and criminalize these families in D.C. and here. Representative Chism, just this week, had to deal with the misrepresentation of facts as to what's really happening and what their reasons for this are. Their reasons for this is because they're being told what to do by Stephen Miller. And they're using fabricated facts, misrepresentations, to try to justify their actions. That's just the truth. So again, I just have to call them out. Our elected officials in Washington, D.C. are failing us with regards to immigration. Marsha Blackburn's been in Washington a quarter of a century. Has anyone ever heard her or seen her lift a finger to fix a broken immigration system? No, but she's the first one to go online, repeat these made-up lies, and call these people who make up our communities criminals. And now we have the facts to show that these aren't criminals. These are just people with brown skin. That's it. Period.
Take questions.
A little high, but
Sure.
I know one of the things in the Representative Chisholm's committee that you serve on, Representative Garrett said that according to the DA's conference report, half the crimes in the state were committed by undocumented immigrants, when it's really closer, now it's under 10%, probably closer to 5%. And you expressed that you thought that was exaggerated. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Well, not only was it exaggerated, it was completely false. You know, 50%, that's a bold statement, actually. You know, honestly, I was a little tickled, because I'm like, he went this far to drive a point home they were willing to give false information. You know, and so when he said 50%, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person. My radars went up. So I said, I texted a few people to give me some see what the numbers are. So I got different numbers, you know. I think I said something to like 11% in committee. Then I get a text later like it's closer to 2. So we went from 50 to 2 real quick. And so it's kind of funny to me. But to the point that you all have already heard, I think I believe we're going way too far on we're getting to the point where we're harassing people. You know, we're not just trying to make sure people are legal in our state. We're following the federal government off a cliff. And you know, whoever you follow, whoever the president is, whoever the top administrators are, I know that certain people follow them. But when a person gets to a point where they're going too far with something, sometimes we have to stand back and say, hey, do I want to follow this? You know, some of our ICE agents, you know, they're just doing their jobs, and I understand it. But also, the Nazis in Germany, they were just doing their job. So we got to be careful on what we do is just our job, or what we see is just our duty to follow someone else. So I think it's going way too far, and I think, we need to start trying to treat Tennesseans as Tennesseans, but also, we need to go about how we handle immigration a lot different from what we do.
Related to our investigation that you referenced, and this is for either Representative Clemmons or Senator Yarbro, is there anything that Democrats can do from that minority position that y'all referenced to hold THP accountable or to get further information from them as legislators? Or are your hands kind of tied to respond to this?
I mean, look, we're gonna use everything in our limited power to do so. Like, I mean, we are gonna reach out to Highway Patrol to actually talk about this. I'm going to try to find where there are constructive voices on the other side of the aisle who know that this is not the kind of, it's not the reputation we want for Tennessee law enforcement, who know that we need to be better. I don't think that's, I would love to see some courage, but I know that there's a lot, this is not gonna get the universal support of people. The question is whether people on the other side who are troubled by it, who are disgusted by it, are gonna actually have the courage, their convictions to work across the aisle to try to get something done. But I do think that there needs to be further investigation. We need more than kind of after the fact, cover your ass statements out of Highway Patrol. This is a real blemish on their record, and they need to answer for it publicly, and they need to answer for it in the legislature. Now, I'm concerned that there might be people who want to support exactly this type of government, and I think that's something that we are up here to fight, right? And I mean, I think our job is to ensure that we are fighting against them when they're trying to push that kind of road, but to try to build those coalitions where we can, and to try to get some accountability. And we're going to work within the sort of normal legislative chambers channels that we have to try to get more answers and information.
I would just add that, we're in this situation because of one-party rule. And it's an inherent problem with one-party rule. And that's something that has to be addressed, and that's the reason we're so limited in the ways that we can address this. But what I would like to see, and what I would demand, because this all goes to the top, I would like a meeting with Governor Bill Lee, the head of the TBI, the head of the Tennessee Highway Patrol, Department of Safety, and get in a room and talk about how they're allowing this to happen and what they're going to do about it. That's what needs to happen. A conversation among adults and legislators who agree that this is wrong. And I think people on both sides of the aisle think this is wrong. We just have to find them, like we always do on any policy, work together, and hold people accountable. Accountability is what is missing up here. And I think we owe that to the citizens of this state and our communities that we represent to get a semblance of accountability for this inappropriate conduct. So, absolutely, I know Bill Lee retired about 2 years ago, but he's still the governor of the state of Tennessee. And so he should be held to account for this. We should sit down and have a meeting. I think that's the level of attention and respect this deserves, and you should demand answers from him. This is under his watch.
Do you have time for just one follow-up?
Yes.
I asked Republicans the same question, but this was a very public operation 9 or 10 months ago now. Did the Democrats do anything to try to audit this before now? Did y'all ask THP these questions or try to talk to Bill Lee previously?
We have requested information on this once those ICE raids started. I did multiple interviews. Stacy, WSMV, have done them with everybody, where we were questioning what the data really was, requesting that data, and quite honestly, we unfortunately had to rely on the data that was provided in part because other people, like I said, Stacy and others have done investigative journalism on this topic, looking at those police reports and whatever they were provided that they didn't redact. And so, yeah, the answer to your question is yes. And we'll continue to push for that, because I think unless you have the data necessary, it'd be hard for the people in charge with actual power to be held accountable for this, and I think the people deserve that. There needs to be transparency.
And I mean, I'll echo that, and, I mean, while this operation was still going on, I was in text communication with, the head highway patrol and trying to get information. At the end of the day, most of what we were sent as Democrats was the same information they released publicly. And so, that was an insufficient response then, and we now know how substantively problematic that response was, since it did not even include accurate and truthful information. So yeah, I think there are more questions are needed now than then. I want to make one small point, and I think, just filling on something John said, like, I think there's gonna be a lot of focus on the frankly abysmal conduct of certain officers, but I also think, like, I don't wanna paint with too broad a brush. There are, there's some of the people who are captured in this body cam footage who are clearly embarrassed to be doing this work. They know it is not real police work. Like, they would, like, talk about why are we not, focus on actual criminal stuff. Talk about the fact that they usually don't enforce these minor violations. Talk about the fact that, like, I wouldn't be here, but the higher ups, told us to be here. And so, I mean, it's a political decision. Like, this is not a sheer law enforcement failure. This was a political decision that got made in Tennessee that put the Tennessee Highway Patrol in a place that it wouldn't go on its own. And I think that the governor absolutely needs to answer for that, because I don't think it would have happened without.
On a similar note, I'm just wondering if you guys saw what happened in Wilson County, where they stood up against the planned detention center that suddenly they didn't have a plan for. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the backlash to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to give, Wilson County, as you know, I'm a native of Wilson County myself, so I was proud to see that the citizens of Wilson County really spoke up and mobilized and organized around, that misinformation that had been spread by ICE itself, about building a detention facility there. It turned out, fortunately, that wasn't an accurate statement, yet another false statement from them. They were actually talking about another Lebanon, in Pennsylvania. I guess they were closer with Four Seasons Landscaping. They was actually the same state, but, yeah, so I'm proud of the people of Wilson County. I have to applaud them for standing up and making their voice heard. That's what we need across the entire state of Tennessee. People cannot underestimate the value of their voice, and if you want accountability, you've got to demand it, and that requires showing up and speaking up.
We just left the House floor where Representative Bolswell's bill that would allow private entities and individuals to disregard same-sex marriage. Republicans seemingly don't want to answer two questions on this. One, would this bill, if it becomes law, allow financial institutions that are privately owned and operated, hospitals that are privately owned and operated, to refuse service to same-sex couples? And they also don't want to answer, or said just flat, it won't open the door to discrimination against other types of married couples, biracial couples, an immigrant marrying a U.S. citizen. We saw it took a Supreme Court decision to require the recognition of both biracial marriages and same-sex. Do you worry that it's going to open the door to other discrimination amongst married couples in this state, and that it will allow private companies to simply refuse service to same-sex people?
Yes, to all of it. The way that bill, the language is written, it leaves the door open to a whole lot of dangerous stuff. I mean, theoretically, you could read that legislation to allow individuals or private organizations to discriminate against someone based on the color of their skin. I mean, the 14th Amendment covers a lot of things. And so, if you look at from due process to discrimination, and you look at the very spirit of the 14th Amendment being passed on the heels of the Civil War, guaranteed citizenship to every citizen of the United States. So how far are we going to go with this? How far are they going to try to push this in the name of gay marriage? And I feel like that might be, again, I feel like that might be the distraction point. They obviously have issues with that, but that language of that bill opens up a whole other conversation. And it continues, and I may have mentioned this in the House floor, it continues to baffle me how members of the Republican caucus just take everything that comes out of Gino Bulso's mouth as truth when he starts citing the law and judicial precedent. And, you know, I guess they just defer to him because he's a lawyer. I wish they defer to me for that reason, but he can say whatever he wants and give any slant on any judicial precedent, and they just sit there and say, oh, well, it must be right, so, yeah, of course. And that's really unfortunate because they're not doing their duty, and that's how we got that bill passed, I think, and hopefully it gets held up in the Senate. But yes, I think it opens the door to a whole host of bad issues.
Well, Leader Lamberth is a lawyer, and he said point blank, no, that language does not allow for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the country's got enough constitutional crises without Representative Balso and the Tennessee House creating more. I mean, this is nonsense, but I do think, the only reason I want to speak is I do think it's part of a broader pattern up here. It's frankly related in some ways to the story that we were just talking about, which is law enforcement that's not following the law. You had several pieces of legislation that moved through the Senate this week. One that didn't quite make it, but still may come back, that are about trying to limit Tennessee citizens' rights to enforce the Constitution. Like, they literally just create procedural barriers to protect the state's ability to do unconstitutional stuff. I mean, like, that might not be the fanciest legal answer, but it's accurate as it can be. They're not claiming that they should win these lawsuits because the laws that they're defending are constitutional. They just don't want citizens to be able to sue. And if citizens do have the temerity to sue the state government, they want to create so many delays and cost burdens that is effectively impossible for citizens to enforce their rights. I mean, you're seeing people from both the left and the right, I mean, sort of from gun rights groups to the ACLU, the Beacon Center, who have insisted on these types of rights for years, be concerned about some of the direction. But the Attorney General's office came and said something in committee about this that just is wild. Said, we're just doing what's right for our client. Like, trying to win this lawsuit for their client. I'm sorry, the legislature and the governor are not the Attorney General's client. He represents the state of Tennessee, and the citizens of Tennessee are his client. And the notion that the Attorney General office is pushing legislation to close the courthouse door and enable unconstitutional laws to continue despite their unconstitutionality is just really beyond crazy.
Yeah, if I lost as much as him, I probably want to.
Right. Fair enough.
Clemmons, wanted to ask you, last week you talked about the Davidson County delegation meeting with NES. The state Republicans seem still poised to do some sort of intervention at that level. Do you feel like Mayor O'Connell's commission to review what happened in the ice storm needs to proceed, and if Republicans do proceed with some sort of intervention, what do you hope happens?
Well, again, as always, I would like for the state to defer to the local government to address this situation, and I think any commission that's formed could be beneficial. I mean, you got former Governor Bredesen on this, so it's obviously going to be a very serious and experienced and knowledgeable commission, and I think anything putting people together to talk about and review, just like we said last week, do a post-op analysis and debrief about what went wrong, what could have been done better, and learn from the mistakes that were made is an appropriate way to go about this. And if any of that requires a change in law to make possible, then okay, let's have that conversation. But I think we need to have a thoughtful conversation and really analyze what went wrong exactly, how to fix it, and then take appropriate steps thereafter, rather than just trying to score political points by jumping on Nashville yet again. Unfortunately, my colleagues across the aisle have reached out to me, I mean, maybe some of my other Davidson County colleagues, to tell me what they wanna do or what they're thinking at this moment. So I really am kind of in the dark about what their ultimate goal is, but I wish we'd hit pause up here, see what's necessary as a result of our debrief and post-op analysis, and move from there. I mean, that's the way to make policy, generally speaking, if you're not just trying to score political points and make Nashville the enemy yet again.
Anybody else? Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Probably should have had this before this combo.
Yeah.